It's 18 to midday and time for our regular real estate segment with the great man himself. Do we have a special introduction? We don't have a special introduction. We'll have to orchestrate one, if you'll pardon the pun. Peter O'Malley, thanks for joining us, mate.
Pleasure, Bill. Good to see you.
I know this is a regular segment on the Michael McLaren Show, but I've got good news and bad news for you this week. What do you want to hear first?
I'm a bad news guy. First up.
So am I. I always ask for the bad news first. Well, here's the bad news. The latest Governance Institute of Australia Ethics Index says real estate agents are the least trusted professionals in Australia. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's just wicked. The cash... so there you go. People are not convinced real estate agents are here to help them. Do you want the good news now?
I'd love the good news after that.
Yeah, you've just followed the insurance guy. Poor old Andrew, copping it left, right and centre here on the text line. People have had a gut full of insurance companies, so I think you're actually going to get a free ride here, Peter.
Oh, that sounds good. That's a harsh mark for the real estate industry there.
Let's not talk about journalists.
That's right.
I can't believe you actually got above us on that list. But you never know. I think maybe the journalists have probably deleted themselves from the survey. What do you reckon?
Well, the journalists produced the article, didn't they?
I think there's a little bit of corruption going on there. Anyway, any questions at all for Peter O'Malley? 131873 on the phone line. Get a text in 0460 873 873. And look, let's leave aside that they're always humorous, those least trusted, most trusted professions things. More importantly, Benjamin Franklin said in 1789, and Peter's sitting here looking at me going, where the hell is he going with this? Nothing is certain except for death and taxes. If Benjamin Franklin lived today, he would have added something to that. Nothing is certain except for death, taxes and increasing property prices in Sydney. It's extraordinary. The latest Bureau of Statistics figures, Peter.
Yeah, that's right. House prices for the year to date, Bill, are up 8.3%. Apartments are up 5.2%. This is at a time where we've seen 4 or 5 interest rate rises in 2023 to back up the 8 that we had in 2022. So remarkable performance by the market, and it shows you that interest rates are not the sole determinant of how a property market performs.
It is such a conflicting argument, this, or discussion, to be fair, because I say argument because people are very envious of the fact that politicians are quite often property owners. There are other actually interesting arguments which we'll get into down the track about why it's actually not bad for a whole range of people that property prices keep going up. Homeowners, for example, and many of us are. Investors, of course, is another one. But the other thing is affordability of housing too. And the Albanese government has we won't politicise this discussion, don't worry, but the Albanese government has that big problem at the moment of generating affordable housing. Part of that is reliant on this market we're talking about.
That's right. I admire the government for making an attempt to bring more supply to the market, but it's not enough. They need to ease regulation. If you speak to anyone that's in the property development sector, they're wrapped up in red tape. I recently helped a client subdivide a property, Bill, and it took 6 months to basically get approval to put a fence line between the two dwellings that were already on the site. That was no fault of anyone at the local council. They actually came to our aid at a point of distress to help us get it through, but they were so short-staffed there. They're so overwhelmed with workloads that there's no ability to get extra supply to the market quickly. And as I say, I think there's a lot of virtue signalling in this housing measure that the government have come up with because it won't fix anything in the short term. I've been saying for 12 months that the rental crisis that everyone's talking about has not hit the market yet. 2024 is going to be particularly bleak for tenants.
Well, this is the thing. Governments can very quickly transfer money to people who need it or create mechanisms by which people can be supported, funded. But you can't just click your fingers and make a house or an apartment.
Correct.
So this is a particularly difficult question. And look, I want to get back to that point I made about the notion of public housing. And now that we've got into that area, a very interesting argument came up in the newspapers during the week, which I admit I hadn't thought of. And that is that the burgeoning real estate market, and I know there are some areas where it hasn't gone as well as Sydney, but we're talking nationally now. The burgeoning real estate market actually should assist the government in investing in public housing. I know we don't want to create create welfare traps. We don't want too much social housing. That does create a generational welfare trap. But there is a valid point about the government, technically, because it's our money they're spending, technically investing in housing because they're basically making us all property investors as taxpayers. It's an accruing asset. So there is an argument that the government should be getting into the property market as much as we are.
That's if they could manage costs appropriately, Bill. And
There's a good question.
And let's be real, that's not going to happen. I think you're better off leaving it with the private sector and making it easier for the private sector to be able to perform its duty. And that's definitely not happening at the moment.
And for the ideologues out there, the investors are not necessarily multinationals and really rich people. It's mum and dad investors who might only own one property, but that property is housing someone. And a lot of those people are very sympathetic landlords too.
So for the last 3 years, our agency, like most agencies around Sydney, has been steadily settling down its rent roll.
Right.
And as we sell off an investment property, 8 times out of 10 it's purchased by an owner-occupier. So that's another drain on the rental pool as it's beginning to shrink at a time where the government told us in the May budget there was 400,000 people a year net migration coming into the country, and numbers this week suggested that it's closer to 550,000. So even the solution that they came up with this week is not enough to house the new people they're inviting into the country, hence my comment that the rental market will be particularly bleak for tenants next year.
Wow, that's funny you should say that right now because we just had a call come in which we can't take yet. We'll have to take a break. And Tony, we'll get back to your call right after this. 8 to 12, Peter O'Malley from Harris Partners is in and his regular segment, and we've got a call from Tony. G'day, Tony.
Yes, good afternoon, Bill and Peter. Bill, I just wanted to say 100%, Shane Oliver, the chief economist from the AMP, touched on the exact same point earlier on in the week. He said basically the immigration numbers should be restricted in the sense that they correlate with the amount of construction we have. Otherwise, we're going to have a shortfall. But you know yourself, Bill and Peter, the only reason why the immigrations are higher is because basically it's propping up the economy. And if we didn't bring in all these people, sadly, we'd be basically in a bit of a recession. But because there's so many people coming in, the demand for products is a lot higher. Artificially, it's stimulating the economy where it looks good on paper for the pollies. But really, if we weren't bringing all these people in, the truth would be out there, and everyone would be in a deep recession possibly.
100%, Tony. So the adjunct of what the current policy is that our standard of living will fall and cost of living will continue to go up, and it's all about government cooking the books, if you like, so the economic performance looks better than it really is per capita.
It's a lazy way of doing things. It's not structural at all.
What is the real solution? Is there a better balance that the politicians could put in place? Like you said, the red tape is just relentless. If you want to get anything done, just something simple. Maybe the state and federal government should get onto the councils, see if they can streamline things a lot quicker. That might be the solution. I don't know. Is there a better way to...
Well, Tony, from my experience on that question, if you're going to have the amount of red tape in place that you do, you need more staff to help the consumer through that. And with personal experience with local councils in recent times, it's an effort to get someone on the telephone to guide you through the red tape, never mind deal with it effectively. So unfortunately for local councils, I'm sure the staff would agree, they're all understaffed at the moment, and you can't have mass building go on in an unregulated fashion, because then you'll get poor quality build, and we've seen the ramifications of that over time as well.
Tony, thanks for your call, because we don't have a lot of time left. And look, there are a number of text messages too that came in, Peter, saying basically the same thing as Tony and questioning that. Joe says, why won't the government go back to a rental buy system on housing commission homes? Laugh out loud, I'm showing my age. Thank you, Joe. But just, Peter, we've only got a couple of minutes really left to go. What points did you want to make in summary of where the market is, where it's going, and advice for anyone who's wanting to get into it?
Well, we've certainly broken down today the population pressure that is creating demand in the housing market for low-end purchases, sub $1 million, and the rental market. In time, hopefully that will attract more buy-and-hold investors as rents go up, Bill. I think the other thing that has not been discussed a great deal will, but to some degree it has, and that's offshore buying. From the start of the year, we saw a lot of people coming from China, had them in the car, mainland Chinese, heading around Sydney looking to buy multi-million-dollar real estate. And the Australian dollar has dropped from 75, 76 cents 15, 16 months ago to it's bottomed out as low as 63 cents, I think, in recent times. So for an expat, an Australian working overseas who's eyeing off Sydney real estate and offshore foreign investors, that's made Sydney property cheaper, and that's a big part of the demand and price increase that we're seeing at the moment.
That's why a lot of them bought back in during COVID, wasn't it, which created that boom that nobody saw coming.
Correct.
Even though the situation then wasn't as lucrative for them as it was now. And there was an article during the week about the big Chinese development companies pulling out now because their property market's collapsing, but not so much the small one-off investors. Peter, thank you so much. We are out of time.
Pleasure, Bill. Great to see you.
We'll do it again very soon.
Look forward to it.
Thanks for coming in. There he is, Peter O'Malley from Harris Partners.